Hello everyone, distinguished guests. May I welcome you to the launching of Thai Bank's score on the 8th year, Responsibilities of Financial Institutions to Society and Environments, organized by Fair Finance Thailand. So my name is Kanika Kitiweshikun. I am your host today. So Fair Finance Thailand consists of 5 organizations, which is Solferes, International Rivers, Foundation for Consumers, Elor, and Earth. So we have done a research to assess the score for both commercial banks and the specialized financial institutions. You see that their scores improve year on year. This is another year that we have many interesting banks. So even though there are some changes in criteria, the banks try as much as they can to improve their performance to respond to their shareholders and stakeholders. So for today, we'll present the research, which we're going to launch the score. And then after that, we're going to have an award ceremony for the highest score in 2025 for commercial banks and the highest score for specialized financial institutions 2025. We're having live through Fair Finance Thailand Facebook pages, both in Thai and English. And after that, after we give out these 2 awards, we'll have a round table. And the round table today will discuss about finance that are responsible for pollutions from studying the Clean Air Act and the PRTR Act of Thailand. The PRTR Act could be quite long. It's actually come from the Pollutant Release and Transfer Register Act. So, but we're going to call it for short for PRTR. And we're going to discuss about this as well. So besides having live on Fair Finance pages, both in Thai and English, so beside the booklet that you receive, other documents, if you're interested, you can just download on the website, or we're going to have a QR code provided for you. And if you want to access now, you can just go to Fair Finance website, Thailand. So first, I'd like to invite Kun Sarini Ashawanantakun, who is a chief researcher for the Fair Finance, to welcome you all. All right. So thank you, distinguished guests. Hello, distinguished guests, bank representatives. This is our 8th year into the program, and I'm very happy that we are familiar. A lot of you, this is more like a smaller club right now, but we're going to have a little bit of a spoil for the score, because you always think that like the first place remains the same, but we're gonna look in the details. There are certain gaps that we're closing, so maybe if we continue into next year, the number 1 might change. So that's a little teaser. And I like to address a little bit why our roundtable focuses on these 2 acts about environment, which is Clean Air Act and PRTR Act. One of the reasons is that if we look at the Fair Finance Guide international criteria that we use for assessment, they have adjusted certain criteria. The latest one, 2025, what increases significantly, it's about climate change. And certain criteria concerns pollutant. So I think in Thailand, we are quite aware about these, and we want to enter the phase of green economies, and we have like a lot of laws where we want to discuss about. So it's not just that environmental law it's important, but it's also we want to address about environmental law that are proposed from the people or from citizens as well. So that's why when these laws are issued, it's going to impact the financial institutions. When we look at the trends of the criteria that are changing for FFTI, Fair Finance Guide, and we look at the trends in the country where laws concerning environment are being put forward. So we think this is a good occasion to talk about this. And the civil society hope that these laws can be passed in the next government. We don't know who it's yet, but we don't know who's the government will be yet, even though the election is coming up now. So anyway, so these laws will be put for sure in the next cabinet. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome everyone to the score launchings for the 8th year from Fair Finance, and then we'll have a roundtable discussions. Thank you so much. So thank you so much. That's a chief researcher from Fair Finance Thailand, Kun Sareni Ashawanantakun. Up next, I'm gonna invite 2 researchers up on the stage to talk about their discoveries. So Kun Itaya Singmi and another one is Kun Setanan Kamson. So both of them are researchers from Fair Finance Thailand. So as far as I look through, the score for banks for these years are actually catching up with the first place. So do not rest too assured yet. Next year, you might have a bit of a competition. But we have... so there are more criteria that are added to the list. So for me, as working between like international organizations and international discussions, I'm pretty excited about the lawsuit. For example, like Tunka Harbor or like Kingsgate, they have to disclose what they were suing about and what compensation they were trying to get. So with Fair Finance said that this is one of the score. There's also the release of pollutions in the air. That's also very interesting. Another one that's also interesting is like the victim for scammers in case that the bank have done something wrong. None of the banks have initiated this action yet, but this could be a guideline for the banks to do so. So please, 2 researchers, take the stage. So thank you so much, Pika. Hello, everyone. My name is Ishaya Sengmi and Kun Setasa Panson sitting here. So we both represent researchers from Fair Finance Thailand, and we're going to present the findings of the Fair Finance Guide International or FFTI for 2025. So this assessment that's so annually, and this is our 8th year, and it's done by the Fair Finance Thailand, and our main goal is to reflect that the policies of Thai banks in the present align with international standards on ESG or no. And before we look at the score, allow me to introduce Fair Finance first. And what is Fair Finance? So in case some of you are not familiar with Fair Finance yet. So Fair Finance is our network, international network, that wants to drive about sustainable financial institutions through our main tools. So we have the Fair Finance Guide International, which is FFGI. And this is a main to promote social responsibilities and environmental responsibility of financial institutions. So main goal of Fair Finance is to motivate financial institutions to come up with policies that think about ESG. So our Fair Finance has been working under the following tools. First is that we want to empower consumers to choose financial service based on accurate and precise information. We want customers to have direct channels. We also want to establish benchmark, and we also want to do like global campaignings to make the global financial system fair and inclusive. So for the Fair Finance Thailand, we've been doing this for 8 years, and it started from 2018 with the coalitions from organization and four leading civil society consisting of Self Forest was responsible For the assessment, we'll have civil societies, which are international rivers. We have Earth, we have Law Thai Foundation, and we have foundations for consumers. So besides the policy assessment, we also work on sustainable financial institutions. For example, like we're trying to promote education to relevant agencies about the sustainable financials. So you can follow us up on the Fair Finance Thailand website. So after explaining to everyone about what is fair finance, up next, I'm gonna talk about the assessment process of each year. So for each year that we assess the bank's policies, we would assess 11 banks in total. There are 8 commercial banks and there are 3 financial and specialized financial institutions. So we'll start from the bank with the most total assets. And this is the process for each year. The process looks like this. So starting from re-evaluating the criteria, and we look at the policies, we look at the criteria of the banks, and we also listen to feedbacks from banks. The assessment you see today is the assessment that reflect the latest information or policies from different banks on the 31st of December 2025. And these are the themes and the topics that we use. You see that we have like many topics, and it should cover 13 topics in total, and it should cover all the services. The green ones are like the minimum requirement, and the gray one are topics that Fair Finance select to do additional assessments because it matches with Thai context. So these criteria are updated every 2 years. So for every 2 years, we'll build participation process both with the banks and civil society to reflect the reality that take place. So from the slide, you see that there are quite changes in the trend. And these are a summary of how criteria change. For the first one on climate change, for this one, there's an increased intensity in disclosing greenhouse gas emission linked to the bank's entire portfolio, and it also requires sector-specific emission reduction targets. And we're trying to do this to elevate the responsibility of the banks toward net zero in 2050 and building participation from the banks in trying to fix air pollution, which is an urgent issue. Second one is gender equalities. So for gender equalities, we elevate the expectation for banks and their customers to have distinct gender equality strategies and demonstrate commitment to supporting family life and work-life balance. For example, having a nursery room or having providing parental leave. The third one, it's human rights. So we added criteria for banks to use leverage for remediation in cases of human rights violations. So we want the bank to use these leverage whenever the human rights violations take place. Besides this, so those banks that work in high-risk areas, they have to do the human rights due diligence to provide proper evaluation. So next topic is biodiversity. And we try to promote the banks to not support plastics industry and also like the chemistries and natural gases. They have to discover that, they have to disclose the plastic footprints, and they have to show that commitment in finding solutions. And the last one is consumer protection. This one, we trying to enhance the role of banks to take more responsibilities and roles for the online scamming and the cyber attacks. And this in line with the increasing scams. So for all these 13 criteria, we have 220 items for assessment. And for these, you see that each bank get different assessments because there are certain exceptions. For example, for SFI, where they have limitations in setting up their own like remunerations policies, and they have to derive that policy from the Ministry of Finance, so we exempt this. So, but to compare the score between banks, we would calculate score in the percentage to be able to compare between the banks. So as for this part, you might have questions what kind of sources we use. So the sources we use to assess this, we look at only the data sources that are open for public. For example, like from Form 51/1 report, sustainability report, the websites or public statement. If the bank do not disclose information clearly, the banks will not receive the score for that one. So even though they have those in actions or in operation, but if they don't disclose informations, we don't give the score because we emphasize on transparencies. But now we have a bit of feedback whether like the banks follows what they declare or disclose or not. So the assessment team try to follow up with the actions of bank closely. So if we found that the banks doesn't do the action of which what they declared, then we put on a red flag for them. So up next, I'm going to talk about the assessments for this year. So for the graph you're seeing right now, you see that for the past 8th year, the bank has increasing score averagely. So this year also had an increase in the score. We found that because like many banks trying to adjust their policies to align with the criteria better. The top 3 banks remains in the same position. The first one is TTB, SCB, and KBank. So if you look at the detail of the commercial banks, you see that the score pretty much remain the same. But what's really interesting is that so the bank that actually have the score that increased a lot is Bay and Tisco, but they're not in the leading group. Tisco increased by 10%, and Tisco for this year they announced exclusion list that cover many topics. That's why the score increases a lot. So for Bay or Bank of Ayutthaya, they got increasing score for the equality on gender. So any banks that accept endorse WEPs, they will get all the scores that are concerns, and Bay is the only bank that endorse WEPs. Anyway, for TTB and BBL, you see that the score increase. The reasons because is there's changing in criteria, and does not actually come from that the bank reducing their own policies. So as for the SFI, it's pretty much the same with commercial banks. The positions remain the same. Banks get a lot more score except for the cooperative banks, or BAAC. So for the overall, you see that the score increase, and the topic that get the most increase is climate change, gender equalities in workers' labor rights, and those that decrease are consumer protections, weapons, and human rights. So the topics that the score decrease actually come from because there's a changing in the way we give out score in FFGI. So after letting you see all this, I want you to scope down a little bit about the top 5 commercial banks, what policies they have in place that are interesting. So first I'm going to explain this table first. So this table, so if you look at the green area, so the greens mean that the banks got more score from last year. The blue ones mean this bank get the score for first time this year. The grays means that the bank received the same score, and then yellows mean like gets less score, and then red mean this bank got scored last year but not this year. So for the first one on climate change, this one is the first year that the top 5 bank set up net zero in scope 1 and 2 within 2050 for both all 5 banks. And they also disclose information of greenhouse gas emission in scope 1 and 2. However, the disclosures of information would be different for each bank. For example, like KTB or TTB, they disclose relevant information to their ports, while BBL, SCB, and KBank disclose information to the entire portfolio of the banks. After that, we want to look at the biodiversity and weapons. It's really interesting for KBank here, because KBank is the only one that does not support deep mining and the production of weapons. So for human rights, you see that for human rights, there is an increase of roles of banks to provide more services, and we found that KTB, KBank, and TTB has a policy respecting human rights according to UNGPs, but we have not seen like how the bank's going to push forward for remediations when there's human rights violation. Next, it's for consumers protection. We found that all 5 banks have policies to provide training for consumers about the cybersecurity. They also like identify, prevent, and detect. And then for the last topic, I want you to look at the transparencies and accountability. Again, interesting banks is KBank. And you see that the assets company, K-Asset, they disclose information about the companies that are relevant to society and environmental issues. So they disclose like a lot of info. So besides all these process, we also build participations process with the banks. For each year, we'll discuss between the assessors and the banks to exchange information in the 2 main sessions. The first one, it's in the middle of the year. So this is to introduce like the assessment criteria, and then another sessions, it's about at September to October. So during this time, we would present the assessment draft to the bank so that the bank can revise, or it could be an exchange of information, whether like the whether the assessors have missed certain policies. And this is a year where banks disclose policies the most, and then the three top banks that disclose the information once more is K Bank, Bangkok Bank, and Bay.
ก็สามารถสรุป
All the information that has been presented or summary of the major points on this year. Three main topics. First is that Thai banks overall were able to sustain the momentum in disclosing of sustainable policies despite the fact that the criteria is more stringent in this year, which means it reflects upon the score that increased in all 8 banks. And the result, especially on K-Bank and SCB, which is rank 2 and rank 3, is quite close with TDB in the past 7 years. In this year, we found that banks has improved and disclosed information when it comes to public hearings from the assessment. It reflects that the process of inclusivity and participation and driving policies, especially sustainability, is actually tangible for the banks. In this year's criteria, we increased when it comes to cybersecurity as another topic. From the assessment, it was found that the top 5 banks showed that when it comes to human development, consumer education, and consumer protection. But nonetheless, we still have not found any banks that actually have a policy compensating customers that are victims of fraud. This is also part of the Thai banks. In overall, Setanat will be presenting about the details of the assessment on each category. What are the changes that should be paying attention on? Yes. When about to category to expand, I won't be disclosing all the category, but I'm going to pick up some main highlights. If you are interested in further inquiry of the full report, you can actually follow this information in our report. First topic category is about climate change. We have 7 banks net zero by 2050. SME banks in the first year, but only the standard score, because net zero for SME bank will actually 2065, which actually slower than the standard. And next is K-Bank. K-Bank exclusion list, which companies with 20%, especially when it comes to coal, heavy metals. And K-Bank has exclusion list when it comes to coal emitting heat and electricity as well too. When it comes to anti-corruption category, in this year there was no change for the assessment because most banks has disclosed their policy like last year. Almost all banks has announced an anti of donation of political parties. 2 banks, SCB and K-Bank, that has some score because the policy has some exemption that some banks can support some political parties. In the category of gender equality, Grande has increased their score from about increasing capacity from the European Union and United Nations, which is increasing their score. And all banks have full score when it comes to gender equality, when it comes to zero tolerance policy. But KKP's gender equality policy has not announced of no non-zero tolerance yet. KPP only got the standard score. When it comes to health, the first topic, that no leasing when it comes to tobacco products besides TTB. There are 3 other banks that has stated exclusion list for tobacco products like SCB, K-Bank, and KKP. Next category, next topic, K-Bank and KKP are only 2 banks that has a policy exclusion list of a manufacturer of dangerous chemicals. K-Bank has a score, and KKP has score in this year. And K-Bank has also increased in score, have a policy of exclusion list of products that of companies that manufacture products that destroy the ozone layer. When it comes to human rights, all banks scored of respecting when it comes to governance and UNGP. When it comes all the state enterprise banks, government savings, and this is the first time they got the score. And Tisco Bank is the only bank that announced that we use leverage when it comes to compensation when there is abuse or violation of human rights from the impact of businesses that the banks have supported. Tisco stated that customers must report when it comes to grievances in the report. When it comes to labor rights, in this year there will be some criteria adjustment that will impact of mini scoring of many banks. And a prominent example of the previous year that stated that banks must disclose process when it comes to grievances of their employees. That is standard score. But in this year, there's only release about the process, resulting many banks has increased the score to full score. And also another criteria when it comes to protection of discrimination when it comes to employment. In this year, there is increased some criteria that some banks must also encourage when it comes to fair employment. KTB and KBank are the only, when it comes to announcement of anti-practices, same score like last year. And SCB still has the same score when the announcement of Equator Principle that must, according to the IFC standard, or the standard when it comes to social and environment sustainability. When it comes to biodiversity, on this matter, KKP in this score first time when exclusion list policy business that may have an impact when it comes to conservation territory and zone, heritage zones, conservative according to AMSA 3. And the next topic, KBank is the only bank that has a policy that will not support any financial support when it comes to underwater mining. When it comes to taxation, all banks have an increase in score. Some of the highlights are accordingly. SCB and TTB has scored when it's disclosing when it comes to taxation and compensation of all matters according to the central bank. Especially all the banks in Thailand has Tisco, KTP, and all the three state banks. Next topic, there is a criteria in scoring for banks that confirms that when it comes to taxation of full scoring, according to last year, that banks must disclose critical information when it comes to taxation. That's why some of the banks have increased in score to the full score. When it comes to armaments, KBank is the only bank that has, when it comes to this new criteria, when it comes to according for credit, that covers not supporting any industries that manufacture arms. When it came to TTB, the decrease in scores because when it comes to arms as a topic, as according to the first presenter's presentation. When it comes to consumer protection, in this year there is a criteria when it comes to responsibility to the banks when it comes to cyber threat. Banks of almost all banks will have increased in score in disclosing about training of their employees when it comes to consumer protection of cybersecurity, training on the matter and protection of consumers. But nonetheless, there are no banks that has a policy when it comes to compensation of consumers that are victims of cyber fraud. When it comes to expansion of financial services, Grande has a full score when it comes to the minimum finances in their account and no disclosing. Other banks, there's actually to sustaining or maintaining accounts that do not have a minimum. For BL and K Bank, will has full score of products of credit for those of the customers with a low income. TTB has only the basic score of this particular credit of LGBTQ only. And SCB and Grande are the only two banks that have financial products and services that assist women entrepreneurs to access to finances. SCB has credit low interest for the majority shareholder are women, and Grande has issue of bonds for SMEs for women as well too. When it comes to compensation in the careers this year, it's about how the scoring method. We'll be considering about policies of compensation of the executives and the board, because these have, when it comes to management and decision making of the organization, and this scoring methodology will have an impact of the scoring of negative and positive impact. Let me give you an example. Example 8 and 9. The criteria has stated that banks must have a policy stating about bonus on the impact of social and environment impact of the bank. also must disclose about the goal of the bonus allocation as well. The KTB, for instance, has increased the score from the standard score to full score because they disclose about the indicators clearly. SCB has the standard score because only disclose of the indicator but not the goal. And finally, when it comes to criteria of transparency and responsibility and accountability, there is an increase in criteria adjustment for the banks. Must disclose about it according to region and size of the industry. In this year, disclosure is not will have the partial score, resulting KTB and KBank KTB and Grande first time they scored. The final topic is KBank is the only it's a bank disclosing names and companies that when it comes to this discussion, when it comes to impacts on social and environment, and then the time frame and consultation of policy. Some banks only disclose some information about the banks that they had partnered, and that's why they had partial scoring. And the final part, if you're interested for any for the assessment progress, or you want to read the full report, you can actually access to Fair Finance Thailand or Facebook Fair Finance Thailand on our Facebook page in inquiries. Thank you very much, both researchers Ichya Singdi and Kun Setana Kanson, two researchers when it comes to Fair Finance Thailand. There are many topics that you have presented, so I want to ask the audience, do you have any inquiries or questions or any comments or opinions, or do you want to have any additional inquiries about the researchers, any recommendations so that we can level up the score? Because some of the topics are interesting. As one topic actually got the standard score, but if you do a little bit more, you can actually increase the score. So if you have any inquiries, please study at our official webpage, but may I ask the hosts of the event, because this round there is many indicators that has many new scoring indicators, because these new indicators, some of the banks did exceptionally, and which particular topic you want to expand on, because just a moment ago many of the topics was actually presented very quickly, especially underwater mining that there won't do, or even protection of women. Can you please share a little bit more on these two matters that I just informed? Yes. May I begin with the gender equality first? The first topic, just a moment ago, that I have presented, because there are some changes of the two major topics. First is about creating strategy when it comes to gender equality, and another topic is about supporting family life of their employees. The first topic, when it comes to creating strategy of gender equality, on this matter aspect is a criteria that we have components that to actually the scoring of the bank. Two major components. One, the bank must have a policy that will not accept any kind of sexual violence or discrimination of gender at the workplace. If a bank has a policy on these two topics, the bank will increase on this score. And also include any banks that have, when it comes to capacity for women or WEBs, for instance, or BAY or BAY, for instance, Bank of Chia will actually get the score on this matter. Another matter is about supporting family life of their employees. To score on this topic, the bank must, first off, must have some benefits to the employees, such as breastfeeding room, for instance. So we look at the report of the bank that has disclosed when it comes to the benefits that's given to the employees, what are there. Besides breastfeeding room, how about parental leave? That is considered as a benefit for the father, for paternal leave when they have their spouse actually have a child. If the bank has actually created such policy, it reflects that that bank emphasizes when it comes to gender equality, not only focusing on women that will be responsible for care for the child, but for them both couple. That when it comes to gender equality. Thank you very much. So you said when it comes to the environment and human rights topic that you mentioned about that will not support any funding when it comes to underwater mining. Is this considered one of the new topics of the assessment?
สถาบันการเงินต้องให้ลูกค้าก็คือบริษัทรายงานการปล่อยมลพิษทางว่า
Oh, when it comes to arms, this is a major topic what we also discussed in the next round. So I want researcher, can you expand on that? The first topic that when it comes to financial institutions might not accept when it comes to deep sea mining. When it comes to assessment, the process, methodology of assessment, we will focus on the policy when it comes to credit of the bank. If the bank has stated clearly that the bank has an exclusion list that will not accept, the bank will also score on the scope of credits of the businesses or any project. Another matter is about, of course, air pollution. On this matter, or air emission. This is another new criteria that has been added in this year, which falls under when it comes to climate change. This is a criteria that will be focusing if the bank has a policy when it comes to their customers of the bank must report of air emissions. When it comes to air emissions, this report will be referenced with the standards of WHO stated, World Health Organization. Now, may I ask a little bit more that none has no intention of asking. So as a host, may I ask, when it comes to protection of consumers, are you focusing when it comes to the financial institutions will assist protection of cyber fraud, scammers? Because you mentioned about that every bank will be scored about employee training, understanding and protection of cyber threats, sharing information to their customers, but the main topic when it comes to compensation. You mentioned that there is no bank that actually scored on this matter. So can you report on that? That moment I just briefly skimmed through it. So I want to expand on this topic is that when it comes to the banks will be again scored when it comes to policy of compensation. At this moment, in the holistic view, many banks have stated that there's compensation if a customer of the bank is impacted from fraud, from cyber fraud. But the gap that you need to focus on this criteria is that to score, you have to also consider that if the bank has any process about receiving the grievance or the report or any process of consideration for compensation on this matter, we have found that no banks has actually disclosed information that deep. So this is the reason why some of the banks have not scored in this topic. So may I dive deep into the detail a little bit more, because many of the banks in next year from today onwards will focus on this matter, because this is a major topic that many consumers decide to become your bank, a customer of your bank. In the past, the banks may have compensation, some compensation, but it has not been stated in the detail. Is that my understanding? That's why they didn't get a score for that. Yes, they didn't have mention about the process of compensation. They may have a wording to be quite general, that there is compensation, but when the team did some deep research, we have not discovered any of the process of compensation. So about if you specify about the process of compensation, then that bank will receive scoring on this topic, resulting that the customers reading the Fair Finance Index will have the confidence that that particular bank has a policy on compensation. So may I ask the audience any additional questions? If you have no additional questions, please. Oh wait, hold on. We have questions from the back. Can you please pass the stage? Please introduce yourself. Where you're from? My name is Natapat, representative from the private sector. Just a moment ago, I want to ask you about the criteria of the banks on this year. You mentioned about reporting about air pollution. I do believe that is an interesting matter, and when it comes to inclusivity, when it comes to trying to alleviate the issue of air pollution, you mentioned about that the criteria to having the customer report. The researcher mentioned that is according to the World Health Organization standard. So there is a lot of many standards when it comes to in practice. How do you practice an implication? Supposing if you lease out a credit and you report about pollution, air pollution for instance, air pollution, sulfur dioxide, nitric acid, PM 2.5, haze, NOx, SOx, smog, etc. So I'm not certain, I'm not unsure, are there any guidelines that what is the minimal standard according to what industry? That is my first question. My second question is, once the banks have the customer report, you have to emulate upon it that the index or the unit that the report doesn't comply according to legislation or the standard. So I have 2 steps. So may I ask, the explanation of the researcher will be beneficial to everyone in the audience. Thank you very much. A fantastic question. Yes. May I report a preliminary answer first? If any of the research team, any members can also add on. My apologies is that I do not know about the specific details of what is the specific gas to report. Details are still in the guidance of the assessment, which you can follow according to our website. The next topic, according to policy assessment of the bank, we only look at the scope on policy that the banks have stated, so that the customers of the bank must respond to. We did not dig deep down of how the audit process of how they actually treat their customers. So I have may I ask Ms. Sarini. So through clarification of the answer, there's 2 aspects, 2 parts of fair finance. One is about assessment of the policy that is disclosed publicly only. No steps about in auditing when it comes to fact finding. This is the limitation of the criteria, and it's the only method that there's the objective of the criteria, because you can actually in comparison of vision. The next second is about air pollution disclosure. The criteria is stated, not that stated that clearly, but it's referenced on international standard. But in all, let me give you an example. A new criteria is that we mentioned that customers of the bank must disclose about air pollution or emissions that impact to health. That the intention, the methodology is to frame the question framing to actually attract the banks to call of the importance from their customers. First off, may I say not anything, but it has to be specific and be critical when it comes to impact to health. So, in reality, that the interpretation of the bank is that, as today may be referenced of the other standards as well too. Let me give you an example. GRI standard when it comes to air pollution, it's already stated a certain extent, but when it comes to fair finance, our criteria, there is a list of international standards there, like pollutants or emissions that we would like them to refer to. So I want to separate 2 aspects, but the focus here is that the contents or the message, see the importance of the interconnection between all the pollutants with health, human health to be specific, and want to see that when it comes to any kind of grievances, when the announcement, that their consumers must focus on too, to be informed, the banks, to be sure. May I also ask on Ms. Sereni to expand, because I see that when it comes to the criteria, it has stated that companies must have to report to the frame of 1, 2, and 3. This list exists, so the banks will have to ask their consumers, get customers to report on. Yes, Fair Finance Guide, each category has expectations that the banks will have to do it themselves. And another aspect that we inform the banks to please communicate it with their customers on the matter. So when it comes to GHGs or greenhouse gases, is also one part that the banks should do themselves and also announce themselves to. Another aspect is that, and when the banks to tell their customers to also help disclose. That is the flow of the scoring of all categories. And reporting of air of emissions like PM10, PM2.5 is there, but not our PRTR. Yes, specifically, it's not the technical criteria. May I also add on that criteria that I mentioned, the sample of the criteria that must be disclosed, that the customer must disclose pollution or air pollution, the impact of the health. That's another additional criteria of the lately in 2025. The reason why we added this criteria is that there are some pollutants, air pollutants, so many air pollutants, and in some countries, some pollutants may not have that impact, but in Thailand, you will see that PM2.5 as an example is extremely critical and severe, which nonetheless the banks must focus and pay attention on, ask their customers to disclose. So any criteria we try to accommodate, focusing on the interconnection of understanding than following up on technical criteria, which the understanding here is that during the panel discussion we'll bring on experts in presenting of the PRTR Act and the Clean Air Act. We'll dive down to details of pollutants in the air. So any additional questions or not, please. Thank you very much, researchers, for the now I'm clear. Now I'm convinced that customer of the banks to please pay attention when it comes to air pollution. So I see that another step further, that during the implemented phase, when it comes to the banks, when the banks using these topics to implement internally, I do believe that there should be other criteria. So I'm not sure if the banks will have to state their own criteria, or are you going to state it for them, or the Bank of Thailand will be the mediator. Well, I want to answer that there are many banks in the industry, so any of you may add up, but my personal understanding that banks everywhere, there is a framework of assessment, and when it comes to filtering of credit according to ESG, environmental social governance, ESG here, if in accordance with the guidelines that when come the Association of Banks that had issued many years back, we call it as material ESG list, which is ESG risk that is essential. The meaning here is that there is a customer who asks for credit, and the banks must have some process to have the confidence that these potential customers, their activities, is there any essential ESG risk or not. So each bank will have their own methodology that is different of that to obtain that particular data. So the reality is this: if you consider and perceive when it comes to pollution, it's a material ESG list, especially pollutants when it comes to impact to health severely. In practice, I do believe that many banks will also foresee that it's in the process already. But it's still, if there requires any framework or boundaries or clarity, which we perceive it on the positive side, be optimistic about PRTR Act and the Clean Air Act will be as instruments to assist the banks. Because there are some enforcement that are mandatory by law that some data must be disclosed clearly. So this is why it will be beneficial when it comes to the efforts of the banks. May I answer this for now? But I'm not sure if there are any members or representatives from the banks when it comes to filter processes of your banks you can share, if you wish. Any additional comments? Please wait for the microphone so that you may speak. Row number 2 to the front. Thank you so much. When it comes to the network of clean air, this project is essential to support and help propel. In this time, there is about the considering of the PRTR and the Clean Air Act according to climate change, part of the Parliament, and the expanding about to dive into details and many criteria. I do believe that the host of the team, you should host another session exclusively for the banks and have a brainstorm when it comes to the three teams that are working on these 3 acts when it comes to policy to implementation into detailed structure. How should it be tangible? I do believe that it takes a lot of time for work efforts and discussion. What we'll look at today is a teaser, for instance. It's just a first step, and we hope that that event could occur. That would quite be interesting, that I think we can actually build upon. So we'll host another session laterwards, a deep dive when it comes to legislation. Any others who would like to exchange, representing from the bank? When it comes to the framework of credit leasing, when it comes to ESG, it exists. But I want to ask a little bit more when it comes to criteria. The matter is this: when we mention about materiality, it doesn't mean that the customer of all customers can or be applicable of all criteria of finance. This is the question why. If we announce any policy, can the banks announce it that we consider maturity? Yes or no? Because in the past, if you don't have a clear policy announcement, we won't get a score. So this is about direction, that the banks should implement in which direction. Because the present we do implement, that we screen the material, but some of the customers have aspect that is different, exposure which is different. Thank you very much for the question. Let me exchange it this way. From my personal experience and engagements, we have seen that the matter of implementation is about capacity building. That is a part, especially the SME, if you're your customers. So the customers will feel that the banks has so many things that we need to follow, and we can't do it. How to do it too. So when it comes to this challenge, may not be as different of another matter that the South Force, when it comes to human rights due diligence, to be able to be audited when it comes to human rights, the same challenge any company, because the general concept states that any company in the private sector must also has to audit their supply chain to communicate with their vendors and suppliers when it comes to all dimensions of human rights. Small suppliers are quite worried. So I will recommend that you have to consider about the point of view about to elevate the bar. So my recommendation that when it comes to financial institutions, human rights due diligence, you mentioned about big companies when it comes to the food and agriculture sector, they are moving towards to women's side. They mentioned that because any audit of their supplies, they host a training their suppliers of how to fulfill the policies, and they actually volunteer to assist their suppliers. So financial institutions may actually consider this besides about stating on policy when it comes to fill out of credit leasing. Another aspect may actually to be more reactive. But furthermore, you have to be more proactive with your customers. So you can pay attention that some of the banks, as considered as a strategy, some banks actually use climate change as consultation. But it may be matter by matter. Climate change, but they may not have considered about ESGs holistically. This is a business opportunity for the banks to demonstrate to the customers that the banks is not calling anything more but now the banks are assisting their customers access the materiality themselves. I do believe that the challenge may be similar to the private sector when it comes to human rights. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for the inquiries and questions and comments, opinions that we are exchanging as of now. Thank you the researchers when it comes to Fair Finance Thailand, Ishia Sengmi and Kun Sitanan Kansan. A round of applause to our two researchers.
เดี๋ยวเราจะเข้า
Now we will proceed about handing the accolades of this year. In last year, 2025, our researchers from Fair Finance Thailand has assessed when it comes to many aspects, dimensions of policies of especially 11 financial institutions, the largest 8 large commercial banks, and state enterprise banks, 3 banks. This is the 8th year that we use the criteria when it comes to fair finance international standard. We call it FFGI to assess these banks. From the assessment when policies of the 11 banks, despite the fact that in this year we have added many criteria and many topics, each banks, as you can see, demonstrated had very stringent and very concentrated. That is why the score on average has increased from 28.6%. Now it's 28.4%. For the banks that have 5 highest scoring is Thanachart Bank, 48.57, Sam Commercial Bank. We got K Bank, 38.47%, and Grande, 28.9%, and this is the commercial banks on the overview, which considered on average has increased. So from 31.52 to 21.26 to 31.52% increase. And when banks, state enterprise banks has increased the score as well too, from last year 21.5% now 21.71%. This is the reason why I invite Ms. Kun Sarani Anantokun to please come on stage and hand out the accolades for the banks. Thank you. Kun Sarani is the head of research when it comes to Fair Finance Thailand.
All right. So the first award goes to the highest score for 2025 on commercial banks. And the receivers, the winner is TTB. May I invite Kun Kamon Panglat Sabha, so Chief of Sustainable Development from TTB, to accept this award. Sorry, it's not on mic, cannot hear. So other banks, please do not be discouraged, because TTB, the first year, I remember their score was at the bottom of the list and they keep rising up. All right. All right. So do you want to bring your team up? I understand that you have your team, so you can bring the team up on the stage. Test. So thank you so much. Please do not be bored of us. Yes, every year it's a TTB, but I have to say that this year it's another year that each commercial banks are very competitive because the scores are pretty much close to number 1, 2, and 3. However, we didn't think of this as competitors, but it's how to improve like all commercial banks in Thailand altogether, and the criteria of fair finance are change every year as well. So it gets harder, so it's another motivation for all the banks to improve their ESG policies and ESG actions. So for TTB last year, we discussed whether like the criterias we with like changing criterias. So the bank thinks that whether we should change our policies towards ESG as well or not. So we decided to have a board committee, like subcommittee, dedicated to sustainability. So this year we'll have a subcommittee that cares like direct care of sustainability. So we call this like management committee on sustainability to drive this directly, because we think this has to move forward. It requires decision making from top management. For example, like for climate change, whether like fair finance criteria that are changing, or like social trends, environmental trends, there's a lot more emphasis on climate change. So in doing this climate change, we do not think of only like just working with banks, but it's working with customers, and the like RN works nowadays. It's not with like relationship, but with engagement with our customer, how they're gonna adjust their business plan accordingly to climate change. So the bank has like the criteria has transition plans, and in the future, how would customer adapt? So these actually are being discussed more, and the banks would like to improve more. I think this is another challenge that all banks must face. And next year, I hope I can still stand here, and so see you again next year. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kun Kamon Pan Laksana. So the highest score for 2025 from commercial banks, which is TTB. The team, please. Group photo. So other banks, please do not be discouraged. All right, a big round of applause. So, Kun Yui, once again, please go up on the stage. We're giving out another award for the highest score for the specialized financial institutions. And the winner is GSB, Government Saving Banks. May I invite Kun Nawarat Ritprasit Chai, Director of Sustainable Development of the bank. So, Kun Navarat, please, as a representative from GSB, could you say a little something? Yes. So, GSB received this award. We have to thank Fair Finance for assessing the bank, and it helps the bank to see that there are gaps that the bank could work on to compare with commercial banks that they have like a lot of scores, like better score than us, and it allows us to realize the roles of the bank, that it's just not limited to like providing loans, but the banks play crucial roles in driving sustainabilities in the ecosystems of doing business. So for GSB, we try to work on this. So even though we're new, but we're trying to work on this, and we're trying to make this come to life, just like other commercial banks. And the award that we receive, we're trying to improve. So as a team from the bank, we see that because GSB is trying to change into like ESG bank and applying this into business conduct, we see that what we do, it's actually actualized, like making real practice, and we are pretty motivated to keep going and driving sustainability, and to both to the banks and both to society. So thank you so much. The GSB team, please come up on the stage and take photo together. All right. You can remain on the stage. We're gonna invite representative from TTB and Fair Finance from team from South Forest International Rivers, Laws Earth, and Foundation for Consumers to take photographs together. Please come up on the stage. So the research team, please. All right, that's it. All right, thank you so much. Congratulations one more time to TT Bank, TBTB, and GSB. We're gonna go to a break. You can take some coffees and refreshment, and then we'll come back at 3 p.m. So we'll come back at 3 p.m. and we'll have a roundtable discussions for responsible finance, for the Clean Air Act and the PRTR Act. Thank you.
ท่านต้องการดาวน์โหลดเอกสารนี่ QR code จะอยู่ข้างหน้านะคะหมายถึงPowerPoint อะนะคะเพราะว่าตัวเล่มเนี่ยทุกท่านได้รับแจกแล้วก็อย่าลืมรับเอกสารรายละเอียดเรื่องการลงประชามติวันที่8กุมภาพันธ์นี้ด้วยนะคะเชิญค่ะ ค่ะกำลังจะ
Alright, so we're about to start soon. All distinguished guests, if you are outside the room, please come inside and be seated. Our round table is ready.
สำหรับท่านที่ต้องการ
So for those who want to share this roundtable discussion, we have live through Fair Finance paid book pages, both in Thai and in English. So you can select to share the link either in Thai or in English. Everyone, please come in, be seated. Direct policy. So the PRTR is actually not something we initiated by ourselves, but it's a mechanisms in the law where the UN has started and requests different countries to come up with, to formulate these laws. So this is the photo we use. So the Earth, Law, Greenpeace, and Vivis help to make this website as a platform to gather the name of citizens who support this law. And some of the slides you see today are the things that we already presented to the House of Parliament on September. And a lot of people used to ask, we used to do research about this. And we asked NIDA to do a poll from the private sector, many companies. Eventually, we gather information from about 300 companies from Rayong province, both like large company and SMEs. That when we asked like the private sector's opinions whether we should have this law or not. But today we're not representing that fighting. So about 88% agree to have this law, and 90% said if they have this law, the pollution's issues of Thailand will be improved. A lot of people ask, we already have like the Environmental Act already, we have the Factory Act already, would this be overlapping with them? But the issue is that these acts, it's pretty much in silo and it's enforced differently. So it should have central database. So when each department, each ministers works in silo and they don't indicate that they need like central database about the pollution's emission, this is the reasons why we need to drive the PRTR Act. So as United Nations has said, so the PRTR law will be as central platforms to find solutions for this. We often find news or information that whenever there's like issues of pollutions on air, people would see from the news, or like even currently we've seen like a really foggy skies covered by dust. These issues, if we have the PRTR Act, we would have this database of what's being released into the air. And in the long run, when we have this database, the emission would reduce naturally. About water, so in the past until now, so those that raise like marine life in the canal, they faced with a lot of damages because of the wastewater that were emitted from released from factories. But nowadays we also face the issues where it's really hard for them to get compensation. It's also hard for them to find someone who is at fault, and these really create a lot of damage to farmers. And these contaminations, there's only like a few contamination cases that citizens win. Only 4 to 5 cases, where there are actually about 100 cases about the contamination case. So there are a lot of substances that were hidden in the factories and then other places, and it's actually contaminated the land a lot, and it's to the point that those land cannot grow forests or trees or food. One more time. So it's also destroyed biodiversity. This is a reason and an important reasons why we need to drive these acts. So the chemical substance, the chemical release, whether on land, air, and sea, the act that already passed through the first round, and we're trying to adjust like at every quarter. Has the cabinet been not dissoluted on the 12th of December, we believe that these PRTR Act would actually pass through the second and the third round already, because at the subcommittee level, all the organizations, including like all the departments from the government, they all support these act, and they confirm that they will support this act. And when it's enforced, these department will enforce them like to their full potentials. So this act allow us to know like what kind of agricultural substance were being imported, exported, being contaminated, and the yields, the products, the produce that we take, whether they safe or not. So this act could lead to the reduction of using such chemical substance as well. So about like the chemical accident, if we have the PRTR Act, we will have more comprehensive systems, or like the eruption of gases, or like the eruptions of fire from factory. These kind of events will be decreased as well. So, and sometimes like when the officers go to visit this factory, they want to measure the substance level, but however they cannot do this because they were prevented to enter the factory. With this kind of act, we will be allowed to do this more. So for example, there was this explosion in the one factory in Maptaput, and if we have the PRTR, it's unlikely that this kind of event will take place. So what is PRTR? The first P is pollutant. So release to the environment, to water, to earth, to air, whether like it's waste from water or waste from somewhere else, before we release into environment. And then register is the registrations from all the factories that will become like the central database. And this database is going to be the central for all departments to use. So PRTR is asking people to disclose the information about the toxins that is being released, and the draft that we proposed to the member of parliament, we already proposed. But then the revised versions, we're going to talk about toxins released from the transport sectors as well. So this is for the Department of Pollution Control to take care of this. If like it's big factories, it's under the industrial estate. If it's a small one, then the Department of Pollution Control will have to do this, and the provincial government and authorities will also have to take care of this as well. So the assessment, evaluation. So our laws nowadays said that the release of pollutions and toxins would have a standard, and the standard, whether it's like fits a standard or not, but we want to have an info at all. Nowadays, we don't even have the data. For example, like the factories. So let's say there are 10 factories in cities. We don't have the data of like how much these 10 factories together like release how much pollutants or toxins into the air. And like how many per year, how many type per year, and how many tons per year. So we don't have the data, and it's really risky to human health. So PRTR would allow us to measure an actual toxins being released, or otherwise if we cannot do the actual measures, we can do the factors, like measure factors to calculate. And then we also have to see that, like, oh, we can calculate the raw materials that were going in and the release that was being letting out. And these have to be disclosed to public. And then the banks who will give out loans would be able to access this data in the consideration for giving loans. So this is the PRPR laws that we're doing. So the benefits of PRTR, so all around the world really place priority in this law, because this law is beneficial to all sectors. The government is pretty much well aware if you regulate like factories or like mobile sources or others, the government would have data or information on their hand to do prevent and to do measures. And also like the private sector itself, they would have the data and they could prevent losses. So I'm gonna ask for 4 minutes more. So OECD right now, it's a spearhead for all countries to drive this law forward. Also, with the country that want to join OECD, they would have to have this mechanism in place, because OECD, it's a spearhead to drive this mission from the UN, and the summit in 2000 firm since 1992, they would have to have emission emittary, and then we call this PRPR later. So PRTR is based on 3 pillars. The first one is access to data. The second one is access or participation from citizens. And then the third one, it's the access to justice systems. So these are the 3 pillars that drive PRTR from the summit in 1992. And PRTR is being used nowadays with NECE. UNECE has asked the country members to use PRTR to evaluate the practice for like the Thailand of like membering countries to join into the Stockholm Conventions or Minamata on Mercury and United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Why is this important? Because country with PRTR law or act, they could use like the database of PRTR to be able to access whether this country has done anything in decreasing the pollution emission yet. For example, like the Stockholm, they could like they have about like 30 substances that are being listed as dangerous, so they would be able to see or to track the progress whether those toxins were being released less or no. And also, they could also do the evaluation on the greenhouse gases emission as well. So PRTR will help in getting that data. And PRTR, currently the UN asks for the countries that already have these mechanisms to use this to measure sustainable development goal. So we could use database from PRTR to evaluate whether they had achieved sustainable goals such as like G3 or no, or like access to clean water, or like the reductions of greenhouse gas emission. And then finally, this is actually all around the world when they use chemical substance to be able to track the use of that chemical substance, like where the toxins are being used, and then each factories do they control and how much they control these toxins and what kind of toxins they are, whether like easy to flame. So these are the countries that these law is being enforced, and this is the old plan. So my last slide. So how is it PRTR relevant to Thai banks' policies? So that was the second question. So to see that this law is really important, and how could it help bank, and how could like the financial sectors provide support for customer who's helping the environment. Well, we'll continue this discussion here in the second round, but we're gonna go to the Clean Air Act first. May I invite Associate Professor Kanungnit, who is driving this act ferociously. that the Clean Air Act that is going to go into this. Sorry, the Clean Air Act. I understand that it's still in the committee of the member of parliament are already, and it has been through a lot. It has been through that Beijing is right now like 80% of the years is to have clean air, but we don't know when we get that yet.
In truth, I had a prior experience before working with her. When A Pin Chom, she tried to propel the PRTR Act in part of the Pharmaceutical Society's aspect. But I'll tell you about on hindsight. But it's about amendments. But once we have an opportunity to cooperate, it's interrelated. But my point today will be highlighting on climate change and clean air, followed by PRTR. Maybe actually increase another circle in comparison between the three editions. But as for now, all around the world they have Clean Air Act many decades ago, but Thailand is still one of the countries should have one. But nonetheless, this has been ongoing at the bottom of the iceberg for so long, having even seen the importance of things that are under the water. One, we don't see it because all the air pollutants, not only PM 2.5, we're talking about others we can't see. So minuscule, so minute. All these things in the air, you can't see it. So we're talking about something so hard to fathom in Thailand. And when the level of mentality is hard to decipher. Because when you get sick and you cause of death, the root of the problem is under at the most bottommost of the iceberg. Throughout the years, when we have to tenacious efforts, this invisible force, how can we uncover and make it visible if we do not have legislation through science to economics whatsoever? Legislation is another instrument of many other vast tools and instruments that we never had further discussion to eradicate air pollution. We want to reach the goal of clean air, to truly have right to life, enabling to implement law that is in a vicious cycle, destroying all the silos and implement truly, because we may have law, but without implementation and enforcement, it's useless and futile. But another challenge is that when it comes to slash and burn, as the costs of pollution slowly decline and change the ecosystem step by step, and in the end everyone is happy. This is about the structural problem of society. This is about distortion through many systems and processes. We claim that polluters must pay, but believe it or not, in reality taxpayers pay. If you want to re-distort it back and make it straight once again, we have to, on this argument, it's not just about structural violence, but it should exceed to the mentality that people do not accept because they don't see it. It's invisible, so it's hard to fathom. So the voice of the citizens, you must escalate and make the voices become louder than the politicians and those that benefit from the current status quo. This is about the structural violence, cultural violence, and this is the result. Create ignorance in society. Ignorance may be in confusion, may not even know themselves. It's a ticking time bomb. Therefore, the mission of the Clean Air Act, when it comes to the citizens version edition, making something hard, and we have to reform. This is innovation in law. Many people do not understand and probably ask why it's taking so long, why it's so slow. It's actually fast. We're expediting it. 1 year. 1 year, how many years? Almost 2 years. It's really fast because we need to decipher and unarm this time bomb. We talk about behaviors, citizen behaviors, or even behaviors of the public sector, or reform some of the systems. That is the bottleneck. So these things is the paradigm of the first round of this act. One, we have to, as the United Nations, we have to raise up, because the right to environment is one type of human rights, and clean air is the rights of human rights and environmental rights. When it comes to both, in context and in system. When it says to the content of rights or the rights to health, it's the rights of clean air as well too. And when it comes to integration of our rights, it means accessibility information. PRTR is located here, and therefore next, once we have the rights to information, the rights to know, rights to be informed, it's the right to be participation more intense and concentrated, and then the next step is the right to access to justice, the right for compensation of the damages that have occurred. This right is actually the substrate. If every legislation is really written out and rigid, even into the Constitution, the state is not only responsible. Things they should do, they don't do. And the things they don't do, they do. And they do not know how to prioritize. This is the reason why once we enact this right, there are 3 steps. The responsibilities and roles to protect and respect and create true results. The dimension of health and environment is the same thing. Many stages have been in discussion that this act has no health in it. So they probably thought it was non-existent. This is the substrate because premature death or the right to health or right to life, as I mentioned, it can never exist or occur in truth if you die before. This is the reason why the right to clean air is the right not to die before you decease. Not only air pollution based to air clean base, not in this vicious cycle about how to solve the air pollution issue, but we haven't overcome of clean air that is essential for health. It's futile. This is the reason why we call it as clean air for health. Third thing is about the integration. Renee Penchom, you mentioned about that. What's this problem? Right on the head. It's the silos and it's the incomplete cycle. We're talking about to escalate. When it comes to structural, so Thai social structure is about dissipation of power and authority and participation of citizens, and about enforcement of law and incentivizing to create that change, the undesired behavior to desired behavior. So we call it legislation innovation, which is referring to of human rights, reformation of organizations, mechanisms specifically for clean air. All these mechanisms, AQHI, AQI, or carrying capacity stating, or having a tenement area, non-tenement area, etc. The database is also included here. Information, PRTR, and big data. All these aspects are here. And mechanisms that oversees of critical zones make it to a special zone. And there's a sector that is the source of pollution. State specifically how to properly manage of each sector, industry, forestry, transportation, burning forest, urban areas, and transborder pollution. It has a specific characteristics for management for clean air. It's different. But everything that is actually similar is under the third category. We're using the same mechanisms. But it's not a silver bullet or one size fits all. But when it comes to, we have got funding or even collection of fees. This is the summary of this mechanism that in all, actually 10 categories, because the rights, responsibilities. 2 is about committees, the tools, instruments, science and tools. Category 4 is the source of pollution. 6, 7 zones. 5 is special zones, monitoring zones, pollution zones. 6 is about economic tools. 6.1 is about fund. 9, 10 is about civil discipline and criminal charges. This is how it looks like. The mechanisms that will be created, and I expect and hope. That's a lot. Yes, Professor, is a call about reforms, legislation of reform that we need to amend and then dig deep, drill deep to the roots of the Thai citizen paradigm. So I want to revert back to the Pollution Control Department, the director of the industry of the division of pollution. The pollution department has high expectations when it's seen the pollution of many dimensions surrounding industries that are developing and responsibility is being irresponsible. It seems that the tools in present is quite few. So after we see these two acts, how does the department sees it, and how is it interconnected with the role of the mission of the department? May you please, ma'am.
คำถามนะคะแล้วก็ต้อง
Thank you so much for the questions and the opportunity to exchange ideas today. And as everyone's now know that the pollution control department is probably a hope for different sectors. But I like to say, I like to introduce the pollution control department first. We have roles according to the Act for like Environmental Promotions Act, and our main mission is to come up with policies and the standards for to reduce the pollutions and to promote the environments to have a better outcome. We also have a role to monitor on environment. We also enforce relevant laws. So if you listen to our missions, it doesn't seem a lot, right? But if we look deeper, we see that the tools that the pollution control department has in managing pollution's environment, it's the act to promote and maintain environment, and that was BE 2518. So even though it has been revised, this act still not complete within itself. What does that mean? It means that there are many elements that cannot be enforced under this law, and a lot of enforcement have to be relevant with other acts. For example, like the Factory Act, the Public Health Act, the Natural Disasters Relief Act, the National Maintenance Act. So it has to rely on a lot of other acts. So the officers who are relevant according to the law would have a role to play. So you see there are gaps that make the enforcements quite inefficient or as not efficient as it should be. So if we have the Clean Air Act, or like the Management Act for Clean Air Act, or for the PRTR Act, personally, I think from the organization's perspective, I think these two acts will make our work more efficient. For examples, on the part that are relevant to like the Clean Air Act, by having this Clean Air Act, it will reduce the gap or what's not exist in the old Environmental Act to add that was not in their old Environmental Act, because the Clean Air Act that will integrate many elements all together, and eventually the Clean Air Act it's directly on like clean air management. So there is an advantage to drive to make the air quality better. So there are many ways that we can do to manage there are a lot of science that could help drive the clean air. There's like social science itself, or the economics, political science. So all these science can help. And one of the things that found on the Clean Air Act is the sources for the pollutions. So the old Environmental Act might not cover everything, but because like the context of society has changed a lot, if you see from like the issues of PM 2.5, you see that there are more players that help make polluted of like PM 2.5. Before this, we look at factories only, but now we look at like other factors as well. For example, like agriculture. But this is not blaming. We're not like saying that like farmers are bad guys. It's more like we need to help and assist and provide knowledge. And I believe that financial institutions can help with this and can help a lot, especially in agricultural sectors. So we're gonna address this in the next session. So that's for the Clean Air Act. And we haven't said about the punishment. So before this environmental act, you cannot do anything. So for example, if we monitors and we do inspections and we found that there's like sources for toxins, then we have to inform the other department to do so. And if the other department do not act, then we can escalate our actions to give like the authoritatively demand to do that. But now that we have the Clean Air Act, I think it would be better because there are lots of actions that we can carry, and then that would give an opportunity for the pollution control department to do A to Z that can help to do in like other provincial areas or like in, and also in the aspect of like type and then other countries as well. And then with the Clean Air Act, we talk about the cross-border pollutions as well. So this right now, it needs collaborations or like international collaborations. So as for like PRTR Act, the relevance to the Pollution Control Department is that as far as I listened to Ajahn Penchom, though it's not a law that discuss about the management for air pollution directly, but the main thing to drive or to do this is first is the law. Second, it's information. You see that the PRTR Act really prioritize data reporting and doing like database for sources, whether for toxins or chemical substance, also with pathway that releases to environment. So with this, it's going to fulfill each aspect when they release this release toxins into the air. How they're gonna manage it? We cannot manage toxins efficiently if we don't know like where those toxins come from and what's being released into the air and how much. So this is the backtracking, where it comes from, what do we have to do and how do we deal with it. So we can bundle this together, and we think that it will close a gap for the old existing environmental act, and it's also complement pollution control department to work on pollution management better and more comprehensively. So that's it's for my first round. Thank you so much. So thank you so much. So you allow to see that pollution control department does not only have expectation, but they need tools to be able to manage, to make people's quality of life in the society better. So I'm gonna move a little bit forward here to the topics that like, so what do you want? What do you expect from financial institutions? What roles could they play? So it's actually a stick and carrots, right? As you said, it's like both rewards and punishment. So can we starting from the Clean Air Act, please?
Absolutely. You will see the measures that will be implemented to integrate and manage when it comes to clean air requires a whole amazing team. It won't be unable to rely on one particular tool. Let's say law enforcement has become obligatory. We'll have a treadmill called voluntary. Let me give you an example, the previous examples. Giving awards for fair finance. As of now, it's on the side treadmill, which is voluntary. But soon, if it can be upgraded from volunteer base to compulsory or obligatory by law, 1 is actually escalated, 2 not escalated fully. There are some times for transition about preparation of the systems of self-management, which is all right in the runway or in this treadmill. such as the Clean Air Act that will be drafted for financial institutions to participate and be responsible things in the front lines, or the source of what? Source of pollution will be classified in groups of those responsible in this legislation clearly. Source by pollution by themselves, or those directly or indirectly, but the law will state clearly for responsibility, or those associated or guilty by association, as we say, as the sub commission, as we're legal experts. When you are related or associated, it means because you are quite close in knowing that this source of pollution or facilitate, or if you want to step aside a little bit further, you are associated but not directly responsible for. So the law should state for these scenarios, if you are close, is considered as guilty as the source. If you are a little bit far without anything in hypothesis, you can actually say that you are as guilty as well too. But mostly there are exceptions as part of the source as guilty as well too, and there are exemptions as well too. Despite the front line, that's the guilty by source, there are exemptions as well too. So you have to be state an interpretation of law of guilty or in association. It depends. Now let me bring up on this slide to actually classify and distinguish between financial institutions is actually in relating to how. First, when it comes to the source, who is responsible? You'll have to know who is guilty for the source, and it really, by fact, if they are guilty by source, they have to be responsible by legislation, and there got to be some discipline or some punishment as well too. This is why the two types of the source creator, must there be some sections to be dual responsible or a little bit further from responsible, but the law had to state by steps. The source responsible are two. Those are in the territory and those outside the territory, but the impact actually transcends to the zone, the territory. This means it's about, I mentioned too, the smog that is transborder from the source. So there are two sections, which is 208 and 209. These two sections, I brought it up, don't take it too seriously, because it's still suspended in the Senate. If the Senate session opens and shoots it down, this doesn't exist. So we have to help and brainstorm so that the Senate do not interfere with these that are we have worked so hard for. The source and how it causes hazard, you must say that they must be responsible and exempted by 1, 2, 3. But another section that it kind of impact and kind of damages may be different. Damages to physical health or assets. Or second part is damages for the overview, environment or the assets of the country, or the environment of biodiversity degradation or impact to society or the economy. You have to be responsible. This is an overview. The type 2, those outside the territory, is quite similar, but the station of the source to outside Thai territory. Transborder. And the story is the same. There must be exceptions as well too. And also mention about individuals of the two types, citizens or companies of Thailand, or as a citizen or a company that are migrants as well too. This is briefly skimming. Now, those in relation, like I mentioned before, touched upon, those by law is considered as source, and those that the law has state that you must be responsible with the source and guilty. Not relating to financial institutions, section 210, as it's shown to responsible and manage and regulate of activities that caused during the pollution. And group number 2, those are related to install system or equipment. This will be exempted. Now, let's look in relationship with financial institutions. Law that has states that you must be responsible with 2, which is section 211. Financial institutions must also co-responsible from any damages from the first prior 2 sections of the source emitters. Unless Phrase 3, subsection, risk system that support or any financial support, or subsection 2, following according to risk assessment, or subsection, inspection according to the terms and conditions consistently. In all, despite the fact that do not fall into any exceptions, you must be also responsible, not limited by the limited credit or loans that has been asked for. This is layman terms. But now you look at the terminology, it will be clear. When we designed, we invited the banks, most commercial, the most that we can and willing to come to inform according to the submission, and we invited the Bank of Thailand, invited World Bank, and we got the commission that is here today that was used to work for the bank before, Ms. Tu, and Kunat is sick today, and she was at World Bank before, couldn't come today, and many more experts when it comes to finances. We invited all of them for the discussion and consultations with the challenge of how can we focus again that the objective, you must be strong when it comes to the presentation, the introduction, what the mission is for, what the objective for, what is to create an ecosystem. The goal and objective, that prioritization of all the system that we giving the awards just a moment ago, to create something as that such event. We want to that goal, that transition, and creating a new ecosystem. We won't go focusing on punishment because everyone will try to fall into the topic of getting punished. That is the last choice. So the mechanisms of creating the ecosystem of the whole entire system, we can't only rely by law, it relies on other matters as well too. And law should open a channel for these two treadmills to be in parallel and facilitate them to actually expedite their efforts. Professor, if you could an example in real life, from the north for instance, we got a lot of farmers that some agents from the banks or any financial institution or even state enterprise banks that issue out loans and even handing out seeds. And there are companies that actually buy, or even transportation, all contacts achieved. The banks and financial institutions are specific, did not state or even inform or communicate, please grow maize, do not burn. You have to properly collect, and then we will release loans. This is the direct stakeholder or not. But for instance, if they say, inform the farmers, do the same, and tell the farmers that we're going to issue out loans, don't burn, or after the harvest, we'll get a better market price. So they will be exempted from punishment. This is such an example. Can you give me an easier example? It means like you're going out there in the front lines, outside the bank doors. I have set your house rules first. So whatever they're going to do, they'll be relating to our terms and conditions. That is another step. But the first step, let's start from here. The system can be set at extent at even at the World Bank, but on part of climate change and greenhouse gases, GHGs. They're about to expand to all other air pollutants. We are sub-indexes. Even the Bank of Thailand, if they're here today, they will hear that the Bank of Thailand has efforts to steer it in that direction. The main regulator is the Bank of Thailand. You must set this system and make it mandatory, obligatory for all commercial banks to follow, not volunteer basis and hand out awards. Therefore, every bank's 1, 2, 3, well, how you classify it in their tiers. Nonetheless, get your house in order, and then you move to the next step, not too late. If you haven't got your house in order yet, it's not part of the commitment. Thank you. Now, according from the Clean Air Act, now let's talk about PRTR. What are your hopes from the bank and financial sectors? May I bring up the final slide? Now, this is, you can read it yourself, but I want to steer this conversation this way. PRTR, this piece of legislation, is not about focusing on punishment. If you're going to pollute the lake or any kind of contaminants or pollute the air according to law, PRTR is not focusing on punishment. If you're going to pollute more or less, the punishment of our legislation that on both sides agree only two main factors. One is about false reporting. Industries, if you pollute the water and there are contaminants that are extremely hazardous and you don't report it in your annual report and submit it to the Department of Industrial Works, and there was criminal and civil charges of trying to seclude or hide reporting. This is why the punishment on this piece of legislation is that if you don't submit your report, there is punishment. If you report that is false or try to hide evidence or try to distort reporting, and it also can escalate to criminal charges. So the heart of the PRTR, the source of every type of pollution or pollutants, industry or non-industrial, you must submit your report to the public agencies, such as if industries or factories in the if the industrial estate, you must submit it to the authority of industrial estate. If you're an industry, or you have to submit it to the Department of Industrial Works, that is your responsibility, reporting in truth of what kind of pollution you emit to the soil, air, or water. And this kind of emissions, if you see black smoke, you will see black smoke around you. But PRTR will state that in this black smoke consists what types of hazard contaminants, of how many types, tens or in hundreds of types, are in annually. How is that calculated by tons or kilograms? That's the preliminary information. Another aspect that will be relating is about waste and sludge, or possession of hazardous material. Sludge, for instance, or hazardous chemicals of raw materials. Any agency or any private enterprises and the factories must report what kind of these toxins, how you manage and store this in possession. This is about risk management of trying to explosion or trying to leakage. Another part of PRTR, all the information that is reported and has been inspected from the filtration of this data must be reported to the information systems, must be disclosed this information to the official websites. The matter is, this information can no longer be hid. You will know that the factory next door or the factory that the banks may actually issue out a loan, what kind of emission of kind of pollutants. Is it true or not? Do they have an intention to decrease GHG, which is relation to climate change and global warming? Do they use any kind of chemicals in creating or manufacturing of plastics? This will enable the banks to consider if you're going to support or issue out loans, or do you have any measures in place, or any kind of insurance companies, for instance, additional information for them that this particular factory, what kind of factory, what types, is it explosives or carcinogens or chemicals that can actually distort genetics. Insurance companies will be able to create a criteria in regulating or even supporting. Therefore, PRTR, the core, is this. You must report. That information must be disclosed to the public. Therefore, companies, banks, financial institutions, before considering issue out loans, you can Google and do some fact checking with this company. If there is coming a project to asking for your support, do some fact checking, look at their profile. How about the responsibility to the environment? How about their corporate behaviors? And anything that is hazardous or any risk with this factory, and you can consider, is a tool that will enable that consideration steps of any financial institutions or even insurance companies to decide. PRTR is the bridge, not in having any specific mechanisms, and it's not about punishment. Therefore, this is a matter that any developed nation has applied PRTR in directing any source of pollution must decrease emissions of pollutants according to your process. If you do not decrease any emissions, or especially in zones, especially a lot of factories, if you don't decrease emissions, you may have to write with many measures according to the tools of law, and you will not get any future support. If you claim that you have a fantastic public or corporate image and great CSR, but in reality you have no efforts in decreasing your emission efforts, it will be a factor that indicates that you are lying to society, and civil society will deal with you. At least communities and citizens around your area can proceed with charges. If you have this information and related to sickness, therefore PRTR is about the creation of the different types of measures. Kun Kanchana, please share about the Pollution Control Department. How do you see, or any hopes when it comes to financial institutions focusing on this matter? And if these two acts, what are your expectations besides, even after the elections, hope that these two acts will pass the parliament and should create as you intend?
All right, so thank you so much. Actually, I have to say first that I was not in the field of financial institutions before. I received loan. And listening to today's event, I get to see a lot of aspects that financial institutions play in reducing and controlling pollutions indirectly. For example, like the assessments today, there are many aspects that I start to see that they include their economics. They apply economics to reduce pollutions. For example, like in providing loans, and they have criteria in which that the loans shall be invested in a company with CSR or environment. There's one that I noted down. I don't remember, but it's actually continue from what everyone said here. It's just that the entrepreneurs that invested, and they have to do a report for the pollutions evaluation. I understand there's a person in the back that was saying that, okay, evaluation for pollutions, like how do they evaluate that? How do they report that? In what format? First, I think we have to be clear that the entrepreneur that's get a loan, and when you ask for them to measure the pollutions and report the pollutions, you have to come up with criteria. There are so many ways that you can do this. Or you can even say that they can follow like the WHO guideline, and the WHO doesn't have like criteria to like measures air pollution in all aspects. There are air pollutions that in like general environments that we call ambient air qualities, and also there's pollutions from like direct source that we call emission air pollutant. So when you want them to make a report, it has to be clear the criteria, or like how are they going to measure, with what tools, and which organizations or which standards they have to follow. If you don't say that, oh, they have to use like Thai standard, you did that standards, it's going to be like many standards. And then it's the evaluation as a whole is going to be really difficult. What I want to add is that, so for the entrepreneurs to get loans and report on pollutions, would it be like your interest would be lower if your like pollutions decrease? That's quite challenging. If you take out a loan, right, with a certain number of interest, if the pollutions they emit are like stay at the same level, that interest rate are at the same. But if you propose to them, if they invested in like reducing like air pollution from doing business, then and the pollutions keep decreasing per capita, then you have a lot of room. So would it be possible for financial institutions to think of it this way, that they can reduce interest rates as the pollution rate goes down, or they take out a loan for environment or for CSR that is not relevant to their direct business? You might come up with like zero interest loans if it's CSR. Or other aspect is that you might set up a time frame that you don't have to pay back the capital yet, while you buying like certain like air ventilations or like or like air management system yet, because a lot of financial institutions wouldn't let out the loan because it's really hard to break even. But they want to do this so they could follow the laws. So if you add these options, it allows entrepreneurs to feel courage and have incentives. Yesterday, I talked to petroleum entrepreneurs, and I asked them if they have like green finance or green loans, what do they expect? They said the first thing they expect is the monitor and evaluations criteria to be a bit less harsh, because sometimes the criteria, when it's too rigid, it's hard for them to get the loan for investment. Second, they said like monitor and evaluation for each like quarter or for each year, some from the financial institution, sometimes it's a bit blurry, like what criteria for the monitoring will be. So you might have to, the knowledge between the loaners, the one who provide loans, and the one that take out loans has to be somewhat equal, so they know, or maybe you allow them to like reskill themselves to be able to catch up with the criteria from financial institution. And then the third one, if we change from being like you providing loans, becoming like business partner, and you invested in like trying to reduce the air pollutions, and this way financial institutions can claim the credits for ESG, I guess, or like others claims, or you can give like lower interest rates, whatever incentives that you could provide to them. But changing from the roles of someone who offer loans to be partner, I think that could be one of the ways that could help to move forward together. And then the last one on data, I want to say that so the air pollution data, a lot of people complain that it's inaccessible, you cannot find them, but I want to say to you that actually Thailand have data. They have like air pollution data you can research, but like each organization, they have different format in doing this data, and the database could look different, so it depends on the goals. So for example, like financial institutions, if they want to know, like in the Clean Air Act, they said that they have to measure like the air quality. It would be under the third sectors that relates to management, and then you can talk about like each small sectors, about like industries sources, or like transport sources, or forestries, or like cross borders, how you have to evaluate those informations and what you have to report to the public. And the Clean Air Act would help the government sectors to say that it's not just to measures and then the government would know by himself, but like it has to be made known to public as well, and then other sectors have to know about this as well, and these data could be applied or used for relevant actions. So this is something I want to leave with green loans and green finance. So anyone's who want to give out these, you don't have to start from zero. You can drive from what already exists. So thank you so much. So it's pretty much similar from Khun Penchom, from that the database that we are going to have from now on. The bank could use. So Khun Kanchana, you said that the bank could help with agriculture in like adjusting themselves, right? So we say that air pollution sources in the Clean Air Act will include agricultural sources. These agricultural sources will cover all like farming, forestries, husbandry. So all these will be relevant to the emit of gases For example, like burning after harvesting. And this is an issue where the government has been trying to tackle all this time. When we talk to farmers, they say that they don't have the budget to harvest, and then they would because it requires like agricultural equipment to do this. So if like financial institutions can support them, it would help reduce the burning of these like agricultural tools, and it will be really beneficial. For example, like using equipment to do this, and they could compress it, and these could be turned into energies, and we would call it biomass energy. Or they could use like incinerator, that's really popular right now, or like biochar incinerator. These will be relevant to climate change because many organizations now support and give support to research on biochar incinerator to help like burning in an open space. And we could also like get biochar to cells. So that's all examples. So if the financial institutions provide opportunities to farmers to do such investment or activities, I think it could do them good, and it would be a direct help. So you see that financial institutions can do many things. So lastly, is there any questions from the audience? So I think there's one in the front and then one's in the back. So and then the Network of Fair Finance as well, and then from Law as well. So two of you, please.
Yes, I used to work in the bank maybe 10 years back. I truly understand, and all the obstacles in implementation, truly understand. First off, the Bank of Thailand must support, especially in this transition. You may actually create creation of a co-pilot, both the leaser and those asking for a loan may have such as some reserves, create a pilot project. This is a special case for any category that the bank has interest in. Instead of resisting or denial of any loans, and you exceed the threshold of debt and you begin to negotiate, this can actually be a special reserve with a special interest rate, depends. Next, just a moment ago, Professor, you mentioned about Section 211, Clause 3, upgrade the system, which the banks, the most important thing, every type of industry or any financial institution, it always boils down in capital. You will have to study. The financial institution must help propel and gear for the future. If you can separate those asking for the loan as polluters and the supply chain and the transfer to the new form of supply chain that, according to the Pollution Control Department, Grande, is the transition and transfer of the kind of loan to the direction for new markets for us. And we will have very positive result and create a pilot at the same time. When it comes for those asking for a loan is clarity. When it comes to clarity, I think there should be some discussions that has been suggested. You must have a standard. Each bank has their own rules. This is why there's a ambiguity between asking for a loan. So they have to jump between banks. If we can have a standardized system with the BOT, Board of Thailand, and all the banks, this is why the Association of Banks will support. And also, standardization followed by implementation of all the parameters for issuing out loans and all the other credit tools that are interrelated. This is a matter, we call it rule-based lending of any kind of monitoring system and creating measures all these things, which has to be discussed in the next stage. This is my aspect is a big matter. Those educating, asking for loan, and those issuing out the loans, we have to find that midpoint and understand each party's point of view. Yes, a comment from the back, and we're coming back to in-law again. First, I would like to thank both four speakers to educate us. For me, I truly support both two acts to create a new ecosystem for in Thailand. All what has been mentioned, all voluntary basis. I want to share my experience that I had a trip overseas and the policy safeguards of mega projects that they actually issue out loans and guidelines and criteria that this project must have all the measures of decreasing the impact of the environment. During that case study or visit study that overseas has so much emphasized, and I do believe that Thailand will follow suit. But one thing that I want to share with from the bank side is that this matter is no longer about creating brand image. In the near future, it will be about the importance of risks of loans that you may have a non-performing loan, because there is the matter of risk. If there are no measures or any safeguards, any project or any loans that we issue may have an impact, and turns out that this project failed, the loans that we issued may actually become an NPL. So this is why I want to the bank should focus this more. This is my personal opinion, by the way. There is two more questions for these two acts. First, let's begin with the PRTR. Professor, before even disseminating information to the public, there should be inspection and auditing. I'm wondering about this auditing. Is it internal audits or the public audits or an independent third party? This is from my side. And on the other aspect, the second act, you mentioned about the Clean Air Act. You mentioned about stakeholders must also be responsible too, unless the three exemption rules. I wasn't able to write it down in time. First, risk management system, and there's other two which I can't remember. My question to you, does it require have three all safeguards to prove that as banks as truly responsible on our part as much as we can? That's my first question. Thank you very much for your question. From in-law. In-law has stated that there are many cases and lawsuits that you have PRTR and there's a financial system that actually cares for the environment. It will be a game changer or not. And Emery from in-law, and I'm also part of the commission of drafting the PRTR. I want to add on to share a picture here. Is that PRTR, once it's disclosed, it will be like a Google map. Once you press on the screen and you can find the location, maybe something special, something more unique about information disclosure, which at the present we can only look at the sector or that particular zone. But if we can actually look at the whole picture, it'll be beneficial for us as individuals about the legal or any lawsuits about the environment, to be able to access to information to interconnect about any kind of chemical disasters, who is the source and should be responsible for the incident or the damages or the impact. Or even in the dimension of the banks who issue out loans, you may actually refer to the PRTR as even equivalent to the credit bureau on pollution, which the banks can assess risk if the source of pollution or that particular industry is there a risk that may be followed by a lawsuit or any compensation or invest in rehabilitation or even clearing up all this pollution. It will be used in issue out loans or and the ability to repay debt. As Kun Pinchom mentioned, it's not an information that indicates you violate the law or not, because PRTR is accumulated information. It's about reporting about the quantity annually. But nonetheless, when it comes to annually, continuous reporting annually, it will be statistics. that the trend of that particular factory or industry will emit, or that behaviors in emissions or relating to particular chemical that may be relating to some specific disease in that particular territory or not, will be beneficial for the citizens to use their rights in the justice system, and benefits to the banks to risk evaluation. So I want to share on this point. Thank you. Thank you very much. Coming back to our three speakers. There may be some speakers from the audience, but what is your final key takeaway? 2 minutes each to answer the question. As you can see on screen, can you bring it up? If this section still exists, once we have a hearing in the parliament, the senators, if they're planning to cut this out, please, we want to hear the voices of the citizens, because the power of the citizens, because we are the few voices. These three aspects, there has to be as mentioned, because it began with setting up the system, risk evaluation, risk assessment, and implemented according to the system. It has been proceeded accordingly, and monitored, inspected the implementation according to terms and conditions, according to the previous measures. It's interconnected in 3 steps. If you only do 1 and don't do 2 and 3, it's like faking information. And how can you deliver 2 or 3 if there is no risk assessment from the start? Nonetheless, we have struggled, but if you want to amend the Bank of Thailand Act, we are pressuring BOT and the Stock Exchange Commission, not only touching upon volunteer basis. No, regulators, the main regulator, must be in the playing field and be serious about it. And all commercial banks must have a risk assessment system, have the same standard, not doing it independently. Therefore, when we cannot amend that act, at least we can create this act, not creating a new ecosystem or pressuring the regulatory agencies. That is my answer to you. Only 2 minutes, right? Okay, it's over, ma'am. It's over. But Professor, Fair Finance Thailand has promised that we're going to create another stage to educate the banks. One more green loan, green finance, whatever green, but greenwashing is game over. But if you want to ascend to the OECD states that rule of law, rule of state, all these gray matters or greenwashing, green activities, don't even mention. Thank you very much, ma'am.
All right. So continuing from Ajahn Kanungnit. So green finance is not greenwashing. I think we agree on this. And green loan, if we aim for whether like green loan or green finance, there are the drivers. So you asked about the PRTR data inspection. So according to the draft, it's actually Pollution Control Department has a duty to do the database, but eventually the punishment will be at false reporting. If you submit false reporting, this is up for punishment, criminal punishment. So in the Clean Air Act is similar. If you do false reporting, that's criminal punishment. So both Clean Air Act and the PRTR Act prioritize data and reporting and facts. The government no longer need to require data from the private sectors. You have to submit into the systems, which is the database or PRTR. And then just one last point. For example, for like financial institution like global international institution like Clean Air Fund and ADB, they are interested in reducing air pollution I was in the clean air fund circles sometimes. The final output for the efficiencies and the effectiveness of the loan, they don't focus on like the loan, whether like to change the old bus that release for like the old bus to EV. They do not only assess that you have to like change all 1,500 cars. They assets in terms of efficiencies and effectiveness as well, whether like the baseline of the pollutions. At first, if you claim that the pollutions from bus and diesels at what number, but then you change to EV, it reduces to what number. So it's efficiencies and effectiveness as well. It's very interesting. Kun Pentom, please. So I'm going to add a little bit from what Kun Kanchana has said about checking the facts of the data. And I think this is really important because data that is being disclosed to public is really important, and it has to be certified. So Pollution Control Department will certify like by source and that come from and data that come from provincial authority government, while the industry estate would check the data that will be sent from factories in the industry estate, and the Department of industry factories would have to check this. For example, like electricity plant would be relevant as well. For example, from like coal plant, if they said like emission per year does not have mercury at all or dioxin at all, doesn't have carbon dioxide, then this is false reporting. Because if you look at like the fossils, the emissions will certainly contain this, but like a lot or a little depends on the quality of the fuel. So actually you can just like check from like the source of the fuel, the techniques that were being used in the process, and like other materials that are being used, and for other additional substance as well. Like petrochemicals, for example, if you said that you don't release any contaminations to the water sources, that's also false reporting. So there are actually criteria that the organizations can use for checking. You can hire a third party to help, because like factories all across the countries are like thousands of them. There are many of them. Not all factories have to report unless they are specified by law. Another one, like these information disclosed to public, as the law said, would be the name of the factories, the name of the father, mother company, location, GPS, other details, type of business operation, and the amount of waste that come from this per year that is contaminated. For example, from like cadmium or mercury, you have to say like your 1 ton of like waste residues, how much toxins are in there, and what's the weight of there. So financial institutions, if you want to know the profile of your client, you can just search the background to see like whether like which kind they are relevant to. So PRTR, has like having a data tools for every relevant sectors to make decisions. So thank you. So the financial institutions now see that this will be a tool to manage risk, and it could help financial institutions to play a part in building sustainable society. So thank you so much, all three speakers. Associate Dr. Kanengnit Buiat from Chulalongkorn University, Kun Kanchana Soisom from Pollution Control Department, and Kun Penchom Satang from Earth Foundation. Thank you so much. So we're a bit over time, but let's take a photo together. Please, everyone. There will be a QR code for feedback, whether how happy you are with the event. So everyone, please come up on the stage and take photo together. Right, so please take a photo together in the front. Everyone, please, everyone. Please. So 2 rows maybe? Two rows, please. 2 rows in the front. So men in the back maybe? I think that's great. Thank you everyone so much. So the QR code will be on the screen for feedback and evaluation.